What's going on, everybody? Awesome to talk to y'all about this game. Finally, we got a win we get to talk about. Let me adjust the camera. Let's get nice and nice here as we can get comfortable. We'll start talking about pretty much whatever y'all want to talk about. It's so funny that you say that, Joe. So I found this game was extremely interesting for a lot of the reasons that have already showed up in chat. In some cases, let me see if I can get this mic in a slightly better place, able to hear me a little bit better. But so what I found really interesting about this game was that this was a game where the defense came alive. They certainly played really well against a Texans team that was extremely limited in who they had available. They're missing tons of receivers. I think all of their major receivers in Cobb, Cooks, and Fuller. But even so, they were able to get heavy pressure on Deshaun Watson and deal with that therein and play really well, which was awesome and key to a Bears team that once they put the clamps on the Houston offense, just ran away with this game on the offensive side of the ball for Chicago, which was really cool. And here's the thing, I'm more than happy to start wherever y'all want to. We can start on the offensive end talking about positives, we can talk about negatives. There were some negatives. We can talk about defensive negatives, defensive positives. I mean, this was a game with everything. And first and foremost, I want to say, because I think this is important, that I think Mitchell Trubisky played a very good game. I don't know, or I think that it's very similar to his game with against Dallas last year, where it's a game where he was efficient as sort of a quote unquote game manager, but even so, he was effective. He was making quick decisions, and regardless of whether or not they were one read decisions, which many of them were, and we can go through that, they were decisions that he still had to make as the quarterback. And the last thing that I want to do is slam a guy for scoring 30 points and a half. I just want to be a little forewarning that I don't know if this is going to work on every defense in the NFL. The Texans came into this game the 25th ranked defense in the NFL per DVOA, and I do think that their matchups were able to shake available. And like, for instance, when you look at what a lot of Allen Robinson was able to do, Anthony Miller, Darnell Mooney, I think, let me put it this way, I think there's a perfect play that we can start with, and then we'll roll on to like Mooney and whatnot, or not Mooney, Montgomery later, because I think Montgomery is awesome. Where I think that this play defines, in my opinion, the difference between this game and a lot of other games. And you're going to see why I start with this Mooney touchdown as we get going here. So Mooney scores a touchdown, as you see, off of this absolutely awesome screenplay. But here's the thing. Even on this show, we've complained about screenplays a lot, right? Well, finally, Mitch Trubisky was able to, or I don't think it was necessarily Mitch, but on this play, the Bears were able to execute really wonderfully. Anthony Miller crushes his matchup. Allen Robinson blocks the heck out of his guy. I want to slow this down because I think wide receiver blocking has been a major issue in this Bears offense. And again, you watch Miller first. He's about to cut block the snot out of his man, and he gets all of that one. Textbook cut block. And then Robinson out in front of Mooney takes his guy for a ride almost all the way down the field, denying that safety from getting a hand on Mooney and giving him just the angle he needed to creep into the end zone. It's an awesome play. It's not exactly a play that you say, wow, the quarterback was amazing. In this game, weirdly enough, the offense was just spectacular on almost every level. Like, the receivers played really well. The offensive line played about as well as you could ask them to. Cole Kmet had a great game. We can talk about all of this. Mitchell Trubisky was very good in everything that Mitch can do for an offense. He did it, and he did it in spades. I want to make that absolutely clear before anybody starts talking about whether or not Mitch had an incredible game or a terrible game or a lot of the very what did you call it, like superficial, almost like or let's go hyperbolic takes that I've seen, where some people are saying this game doesn't matter, anybody could do it, and some others are saying This was incredible. This was the game that the Bears needed to see. Re-sign Mitch now so that you can keep it from being less expensive. And I think both of those sides are a little aggressive, is what I would say. I thought this was an extremely good game by Mitchell Trubisky. Seriously, I thought at the same time and in the same breath as it being an extremely good game, I don't think it changed my opinion of who he is. But we can get into that later. I think the first guy that I want to talk about, somebody mentioned it in the chat. I do want to start with the offensive line, David Montgomery, and what that has meant for the Bears running game. So we talked about this a little later, where I think, it's interesting you say that, Joe, that this game is an indictment of Nagy, because I look back at the Dallas game and the games like the Los Angeles Chargers game and other games where the Bears offense, sure, they didn't necessarily put up points, but they looked pretty much exactly like this. I think that this was just this is Mitch's game plan that he works really well in, and when he's able to play the Detroits of the world, the Houstons of the world, the Jacksonvilles of the world that we're going to see coming up, and even like the New York Giants, he's able to be relatively successful. But then he runs into the Packers and he throws 2 interceptions, and you just shouldn't be surprised at this point. Just like last season where he lit up the Lions, he lit up the Cowboys, and then immediately lost the Packers, lost to the Chiefs, and beat the Vikings second string. Hey, that was a solid performance in and of itself. But that's the thing. Like, I think the Mitch Trubisky stuff is fairly complicated because a lot of it comes down to defensive matchup, and I don't hate the guy. At this point, I think I know a good idea of who he is, but we can go through that later. Bill Lazor, honestly, I have no idea, Sean, whether or not he's a nice guy, but I do want to talk about, it is kind of crazy, Igos, you talked about this, like, that Montgomery got 11 carries. I do think it's interesting, though, because he got maybe 4 carries in the first half, and the Bears were still able to use play action effectively. But let's talk about this. So last week, we kind of talked about how David Montgomery, when it comes to picking his hole, so most of these runs, for instance, the Bears are going to try to open up a hole here, and there's 3 rules that come to running the ball. You either want to bang the ball inside, so if you're trying to hit this B gap right here, I guess this is the A gap, this is the B gap, this is the C gap, in case y'all are curious. But so if you're trying to hit this A gap, your choices as a running back are to bang the ball inside if things go south, or it is to bang the ball through the hole, bend the ball inside, or bounce the ball outside. Those are the 3 terms you need to know: bang, bend, and bounce. And I always think bang is the inside one, as you can tell, until I remind myself it's bend. But so anyways, where I think Montgomery has struggled is that in terms of bending and banging, he does a great job, but he doesn't like to bounce the ball. And this has meant that when the offensive line's gotten clogged up, they haven't been able to get much for him. But with Charles Leno and Cody Whitehair, and I don't even think Charles Leno is some kind of fabulous blocker over here, but he's getting the job done enough, whereas Cody Whitehair is probably the Bears' best run blocker, and Sam Mustipher and Alex Bars will go over their strengths and weaknesses. I know a lot of people are getting really, really, really excited about these two, and we can go through what I think they're doing really well and what they're not. This is a great example of what they're doing well. They're getting into position, and this creates obviously a cocktail where against this Houston front that decided to put 5 on the line and leave 1 guy back in deep safety, and that's the only guy, Montgomery is able to break loose on a play where, as you can see, Mustipher and Whitehair pull off a wonderful double team step up where Whitehair's going to kick off there and go get every bit of his man. Ifedi and Bars are the unsung heroes of this, as I really think the Bears are trying to get the hole over here, but this is, like we talked about earlier, a moment for Montgomery to bend the run up into the middle. So instead of following the original hole that you can see Charles Leno and Cody Whitehair are trying to set, you bend it up the middle and you go from there. And this is where Montgomery has really been able to shine this year, because Ifedi gets just enough of his man, as does Bars, to keep them off of Montgomery, and then Montgomery has 1 man to beat in space, the safety. And we talked about this during the Lions game. I think we've talked about it a little during the New Orleans game, as well as the Packers game even. When you get Montgomery a couple yards running room and he's able to kind of get humming in the old school sense, he's able to break tackles at the second level like not a lot lot of running backs that I've seen in the league. Like, he just saws through tacklers. In this moment right here, he just puts that arm out, takes a nice angle, and he is gone. And it's wonderful to see because he does this in both phases. He does this as a receiver. He does this as a runner. If you can get him that step forward, he's able to break first contact. And I think that's huge for the Bears. We'll go through it one more time where this just makes me look as silly as it sounds and as almost meat-headed as it sounds. If the Bears could get Montgomery a better offensive line, I think you'd see him produce a lot more, because seriously, his ability against first contact is awesome. And somebody said it in the chat, he looks a little slow, and I get that. I mean, I don't think Montgomery's the fastest guy in the world, but at the same time, I don't think he needs to be. A running back's job is to try to hit somewhere between, what do you guys think, about 5 and 15 yards per run. That home run speed people crave, I don't think it's quite as big a deal in a running back as some want to make it, if that running back can be consistent. Where I've been impressed with Montgomery is his ability to consistently break that first tackle. And again, it all comes down in this moment to it's funny, somebody talked about Allen Robinson. I can't wait to share something there. It comes down to Mustafa and Bars and Ifedi just getting in the way of their men. These aren't heroic blocks. They're nothing incredible, but they're nothing incredible, but they're good enough, and Montgomery's able to make a play against the safety for exactly that reason. And like Derek Reeves says, I don't think it's necessarily a meat-headed take until you want a fullback with Holtz, and I think Holtz is not as good a fullback as I'd like an actual fullback to be, which I'm not advocating for a fullback, but I just wanted to put that out there. Either way, the Bears were able to get one really long run, and from there, they just went play action over and over and over and over. And I thought that was really interesting because the Bears were able to benefit off this really, really well. Well, we've talked about this before, where I think Mitch Trubisky is at his absolute best. And obviously on this play, I don't think they're going to go with play action, but where I think Trubisky is at his absolute best, and I mean he is probably a top 12 quarterback in this specific mode. Maybe not top 12, but he produces really, really well when his first read is open. Like when Mitch Trubisky can say to himself, okay, I'm going to take this snap. This is going to be a zone coverage look, and I can tell because Montgomery just motioned into the backfield and nobody trailed him. I'll back that up in case you guys can see it, because Mitch actually points it out even. Let me make sure we are moving at full speed. Perfect. So you're going to see Montgomery motion in, and this guy is going to pop up. That's a classic indicator of zone coverage. And in that moment, Trubisky's able to say, okay, well, if it's zone coverage, I won't be surprised if it's a cover 3 zone. That would have this deep safety right here, this guy dropping back to right about there, and this guy holding back to there, which if it is like most zones, if it's not an invert of some kind, you're going to have this defensive end kick out over here, this guy, or like this linebacker sit in the middle somewhere, and that's going to open Allen Robinson up on a slant that if you just wait for it, it'll show up. And it does. Where Mitch points out that blitz, he knows he's got to get the ball out of his hand, and he can make this nice little predetermined throw to Allen Robinson that is wonderfully on time, very, very accurate, and is overall a very good play. In these kinds of moments, Mitch Trubisky is money. He is Moneybags Mitch, Maserati Mitch, whatever you want to call him. This is where Mitch Trubisky is at his best, and you're not going to see him not at his best for pretty much this entire game, because whether it was Bill Lazor, Matt Nagy, John DeFilippo, or just a great day for Mitch, the Texans had more or less no answer for the entire first half for whatever the Bears threw at them, and defensively speaking, they got everything, or they couldn't do anything to stop the Bears' attack. The Bears got just about everything they wanted within reason, and I think the scoreboard shows it because it's important. And exactly like you're saying, John, the Bears just doused them with play action. They used these kinds of heavy sets right here. I want to highlight this because it's important. We just saw an empty set where the Bears were able to run a quick play, but right here the Bears line up in what looks like absolutely it looks 100% like it's going to be a running formation. Everything about this formation right here suggests that they're going to run the ball, and the Bears don't. They did this a lot. Instead, Apologies. I actually, and never mind. If you hear coughing, know that I'm all right. And I'm planning on fighting through it. But so, anyways, what the Bears were able to do, and they did this a lot, was that they were able to kick some wide receivers out here into space with one guy underneath. I don't know the exact route package off of this, but they would use these condensed sets to suggest that they were going to slam the ball with, in this case, it looks like Cordero Patterson, and then they just didn't. Instead, they'd fake that handoff. Mitch has a really wonderfully clean pocket. In this case, Cole Kmet seems to be backing him up. And Mitch would take a look downfield. He'd check, or usually he has a high, a medium, and a low read, as you can see right here. And for some reason, this defender, we can go through a bunch of these kinds of plays, and you're going to take a look. This defender always turned his back, partially because Mitch was able to get him to turn his back, but it left the underneath defender consistently open, which was really great for not only Mitch Trubisky, but also the offense, because when you've got players that are able to catch the ball with almost 15 yards of space around them, you're going to be able to get some yardage, and everything's relatively easy. Like, it doesn't get a ton, it doesn't get a ton easier than this. And I really think all of it comes from the fact that the Bears were able to succeed with even just one run. Showing that they could run one time for 80 yards is enough to put the fear of God in a defense, and that really helped the Bears, because if you watch a bunch of these plays, you're going to notice that both Mustipher and Bars are consistently either helping each other or even more often being helped by somebody else, where they're able to, or the Bears know that they don't love the matchups, like especially one-on-one matchups with Bars and Mustipher, but they're able to help them out through the use of play action and help Mitch get the ball out of his hands. And even Jimmy Graham is able to run like 12 yards after the catch, you know the guy was wide open, because like DJ is kind of saying in the comments section, Graham is not exactly the most mobile player in space in football, but he looks pretty good there. At that point, the Bears, again, they would just drop back and make quick little actions like this. Allen Robinson was dominant. I want you guys to watch what he does to Vernon Hargreaves here. There's nothing really crazy about this, but watch Hargreaves' cushion. So he already starts at this point. Let me go ahead and turn my notifications off here. But so Hargreaves is already going to start with about an 8-yard cushion, which is a whole lot of respect. Let's get this changed to a slightly more visible color. Perfect. Yeah, I think we got the red back. But when they actually go to run this route, Robinson is going to fake a go route. And I mean, for crying out loud, when you're good enough to get your guy to bite with still 6 yards of cushion, because he's opening his hips up to the inside, which is wild. This is about as easy as yardage gets, because Hargreaves has absolutely no chance at beating Allen Robinson on this comeback route, which is thrown pretty nicely by Mitch to get the ball outside the numbers to make sure that the cornerback can't make a play on it. But it's as easy as it gets for both the wide receiver and the quarterback. And when the pocket's holding on these quick little throws like this, because they are, I mean, again, when you watch this, you're going to see, let's slow it down, you're going to see more double teams on the front, where both Mustipher and Bars are going to get help. As they watch those defenders, you're going to see Bars and Mustipher each have a buddy next to them that's able to help control the pace of the line of scrimmage and help the Bears get the ball out. One thing, by the way,